knives and spoons only, so no forks or chopsticks, or never use pen or pencil and paper again.
It's just stupid.
Huh.
I'm just
Trying to think of what foods I can't have with a fork, like without a fork.
spoons are actually pretty legit though. Like
Yeah,
there's
good.
so many things you can do with a spoon, right?
I've kind of always used my fork like a spoon and a knife. Like it's like
Oh, yeah.
it's my go-to, you know? You use it to chop things and use it just to scoop things up. So I don't know.
You kind of miss the prong action though, like the prodding thing, where you like prod
Yeah.
something and then you pick it up that way.
But you could just go like Wolverine with 3 knives though, and then there's your fork. Right?
Between your fingers.
Yeah. I'm always about the hack.
Does that even work? I think you need like a little barb on the edge so it doesn't just slide back down the same hole you
I'll
made.
make it work. Stab it down and then. But pen and paper and pencil, like I reckon you could live without it now pretty easily. Like I definitely miss having it as a thing. Like I use it at work every day, like writing down the notes or like filling orders and that kind of stuff. But you can work around it. I'll be printing a lot more, I think, in general. But I don't know if I need that fork. I mean, I've got my Wolverine fingers, so like, do I need the fork? I don't know.
How are you gonna eat spaghetti?
I don't like spaghetti that much, to be honest.
Okay.
It'd be quite funny at the restaurant though. You go there, it's like a nice, classy restaurant, and you're like, "Sir, could I please have a spoon?" He's like, "Bro, you've got steak. Like, what are you up to?"
You got your steak knife and your spoon.
Eating a T-bone steak. Just 2 knives. That's what you just like, knife and knife. Just
I mean, you could just totally embrace the caveman, like, and not explain to people that you're not allowed to use a fork. Just like pick everything up with your hands, and I mean, it's a little rude, but it's quite efficient.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But in some cultures, it's just the way people eat, man. So, you know.
Yeah.
My 2 girls have this like unwritten challenge to not use their knife during dinner time. Like amount of times they're like the knife sits there and they'll use their pinky finger like to guide their peas onto their fork, and they'll do other things like to try and not use their knife. Like it's like bragging rights after dinner. Like I didn't use my knife. Like, cool. Well, it was there to be used, but sure.
All right. And tonight we're having schnitzel. Good luck, girls.
I'll caveman it for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, just pick it up. Just bite chunks out of it. I did learn, I went once, I was in Sicily at like this camp, and we were doing some stuff for a bunch of like refugees coming into Italy in that time period. And we had this kind of like, we made some dinner and ate it with a bunch of people from, that were in this kind of like housed refugee place. And they were all like teenagers. And they like taught us how to eat with our hands, rice. And it's actually super efficient. Like you scoop it up in a bowl and you use your thumb to just like push it into your mouth. And it was like, because obviously you think like, oh, eating with your hands, it's like, it's real messy or whatever, but it was actually like not. And so I was like, oh, well, that's really interesting, because like that's how in a lot of countries in Africa, etc., they eat their rice dishes and stuff like that. It's like, it's actually super efficient and just as good or even better than eating it with a fork. But I still haven't rocked it out in New Zealand context. I was having a curry for lunch the other day, so with Sam actually, and I wasn't eating with my hands, so he can attest to that.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think I went to India like 20 years ago or so, and
Yeah.
all the locals never used a fork. It was just you rip off your naan bread, you scoop up some with a naan, little pocket, and then eat that. Which I do at home as well, right? Like I use naan like that at home. Or when you've got like mince and tacos, and you got to try and get that balance right of like, oh, not tacos, what do you call the tortilla chips?
Nachos.
And you try and nachos, yeah. And you try to like get that balance right of like meat to nacho, or meat and chili beans to nacho, so that by the end of it, you don't need to use your fork. That's my own challenge to myself most times. I try not to use the fork with nachos.
Dude, dinner at your place is just the mini games, man. Like all these little challenges and mini games and quests and stuff. Like just minimalist, how few pieces of cutlery can I use?
Yeah, no plate next time. Just chili beans and your hands.
I mean, soup with no spoon. You just use your bowl. Like
no bowl, no bowl of soup. Yep.
No bowl. No need for a bowl.
Straight from the pan.
Yeah, whenever we have nachos at home, like, if my wife sets the table, she puts the knife and fork, and I'm like, what are these for? Like, I don't need these. Yeah, answering the question though, I think I would choose having the fork, because like I do like a pen and paper, but I also often use just like my notes app on my phone for things. And I'm someone who like I went to university and I never wrote down any notes in my lectures because I just hated like handwriting. And I've always been like a really slow handwriter because I don't hold a pencil or a pen properly. And when I was a kid, I was just like stubborn. I don't know why. I just didn't learn to do it. And so like if I write for a long time, it's really uncomfortable because I don't have a proper grip, and I haven't taught myself how to hold it properly as an adult either. So I just like have always preferred digital for a lot of things. I do admit that like having the physical book can be really helpful because obviously digital, where is that file if it's filed it away somewhere and having something physical that you can just look at and see your priorities or whatever can be very helpful. But to be honest, I think a fork is more important to me than being able to write down on a physical piece of paper because as I said, growing up, fork was like a tool for me. It was like any meal, I'll just eat it with the fork. I'll eat the curry with the fork. I'll eat not the soup, might need a spork for that. But but as I said, I'm not really a soup guy. So, there we go.
Well, Sam's on liquid still, so kind of on liquids. It has been on liquids. So, like, what's a fork even for?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. I'm sort of finding it hard to land the plane with this one. It's a good question because both of these things are quite doable, but they're also mildly annoying. Like, it's just a little bit inconvenient, both of them. I think I would probably land the plane at I'm going to stick with having pencil and pen and paper just because I do write notes for lots of different things. And I know that I could move to having my cell phone, but there's something about just the original medium for doing it. Well, maybe not OG, like scrolls and like tiles and stuff, but like, I don't know, something about just getting away from a screen and going down and sitting at the table and writing stuff down. It's part of my design process as well. It's part of like just being creative for me. Even though my handwriting is terrible, I never got a pen license. We did this thing did they have them at your primary schools, pen licenses?
I don't think so.
License to
No.
write.
It was this kind of thing where like you do your handwriting with pencil, and if your handwriting was nice enough, you get this little pen license, and then you're allowed to use a biro pen. But I never got it. But then when I go to high school, baby, they're not checking for pen licenses.
Yeah.
Amazing. It was like the hacks, man. So
It's not a national standard.
I think I'm sticking with pen and pencil. And I haven't quite thought of the meal that is like checkmate without a fork yet. But I'm sure there are some that are really awkward without a fork. But for now, I think spoons and knives will be sufficient.
You'll survive.
Yeah.
I think spaghetti is checkmate without a fork, though. It's like, how are you eating that? Spoon, you can't wrap the pasta around it. I mean, you'd have to cut it up. You have to cut it up into little bits. And then, like, what we do for our daughter when we have spaghetti is we cut it up into little bits and then she eats it with a spoon.
Yeah, there we go. Would you cut my spaghetti for me?
Yeah, bro.
So I don't think there's any board games you can't play without a fork, but there are plenty you can't play without a pen.
Oh,
There we go.
So Zach has just written off all roll and writes and flip and fills.
Sorry, Bobby.
And like Sam, you would want to keep playing just one, right? And so Clover.
100%.
Yeah, more than
100%,
eating
yeah.
with a fork. Yeah, I'm in that camp as well.
Nice.
Like, I mean, I don't write that much, but I think I would definitely miss it if I couldn't write stuff down. And who needs forks when you've got 3 knives? So
The Wolverine over there. Love it.
Welcome to the Lens and Veil podcast. Join Shem, Sam, and Zach as they dive into a designer-focused analysis of Men-Nefer by Germán P. Millán.
So in this episode, we are discussing the big Euro game Men-Nefer. This is a game set in ancient Egypt, and I only learned today that Men-Nefer is actually the name for the city of Memphis, which was one of the old capitals of Egypt. And in this game, we're doing pretty much classic Egyptian things. We have sarcophagus, we have the pyramids, the obelisks, the priests and the Nile River and the scarabs and, did I say pyramids? All that kind of stuff that we have in Egypt. And we are essentially using our turns to try and build up the city of Men-Nefer, all for glorious victory points. It's a sort of a medium to heaviest Euro game that plays over 3 rounds. And I like to describe it mostly as a points engine builder. There's really not much engine building in the game at all. It's pretty much you're doing a tactical kind of puzzle to try and achieve things on the board, to change the state of the board, to pick up things or build things, to then score those things at the end of each round. And there are 3 rounds, and you really have to try and push into a certain path or certain 1 or 2 paths to try and maximize your scoring in certain areas. And you're doing very much a tactical puzzle of trying to play certain actions at certain times and to go to places where they're not blocked at certain times to then block others, and try and time your actions so that you're paying as little fish as possible and trying to kind of move along these tracks to get better and better and stronger actions in each of those areas. So each round there is a little bit of an income step, but it's very minor. You might get some hecker, which is one resource, or fish, which is a resource you often use to take actions. And then we go into the main thing of the game, which is the action taking phase. There are 9 actions for each player each round, and there are 3 types of actions, and you'll do each of those 3 times. The first is that you can place your worker onto one of the 5 spots, these different rows on the main board, and you're going to perform the action that is associated to the tile beneath your worker. So you're going to get this tile later on as well by another action, but you start with these 3 basic actions, and when you place your worker, you perform the action on the tile, then you discard that tile. Very simple. If there are some workers already in that spot, you have to pay fish based on the number of workers there, which could be your workers or other players' workers. The second action is to move a worker you previously placed from that place where you put it over to the right, and then you're going to take the action associated with that row. So when you're placing out your worker, you are thinking about, oh, where's it going to move to on my next action? And you can perform the action, you can bump your scarab along this track. There's 5 tracks, and they correspond to 5 areas of the game. And you're going to perform the action based on how far along your scarab is, or space from behind it. And then the last type of action you can take is to pick up a tile, which you're going to place below your slot on your player board, which you'll then be able to place out next round for your worker. So you're kind of setting up your next worker action for the next round. So you're going to place out 3 workers, you're going to move 3 workers across, and then you're going to retrieve 3 tiles for your workers for next round. And you can do those mostly in any order, but your first action is always going to be to place the worker, and from there you have some decision around what you might do afterwards. Just quickly on the actions that are correlated to the different scarab kind of tracks, we have building the pyramids. So you're going to move along that track, and the further you go, kind of the more build actions you can do, or the faster you can do those build actions, I guess is a better way of putting it. You move along these little build tracks, and every time you cross over a little threshold, you get to build part of the pyramids. So the next one is all about the mummies. You have these mummies on your player board. There's one action to kind of move them across, but the more important one is to place them on the board as sarcophaguses. And you have stronger actions with the further on the track you are. So that if you go very far on that track, when you place your mummy out on the board, you get kind of more stuff. Generally just more track bumps in other areas. Third scarab track is all about the temple. You are trying to acquire goods and then going to move up your priestesses in the temple and then sell those goods for various benefits. The fourth track for the scarabs is about moving your ships along the Nile and then grabbing income from them or gaining benefits from them. So you can get fish from them, but the main use is to try and jump into these little ports, grab these scoring tiles, which if you achieve them, they're worth points each round, and then move them along further to get income, hopefully each round as well. And the last one is very similar to the mummies. You have these sphinxes. You can move them across on your player board to unlock them. And then once you have them, you can place them out on the player board for these big, immediate, powerful actions. And the further along that scarab track you are, the stronger those actions that you have access to. The other main kind of part of the game, probably to cover really quickly, is just the feather and heart track along the very top. We start with 1 feather and 1 heart piece each at either end. They're very far apart. And you're essentially saying at the end of the round, the distance between them, there's these little checkpoints, you're going to lose points each round. So you're motivated to try and get these feather and heart to cross. And then once they do cross, you keep pushing them to the more extremes, so you start getting points from this track. So there's a lot of areas in the game where you are trying to bump your heart and your feather closer together in order to not lose points. But that's what you do in the main action phase. You are taking these 9 actions in various orders and trying to bump along these tracks and score, or, set yourself up to score in certain areas of the game. So once everyone has finished their 9 actions, there's going to be the end of round steps, which is basically just a big scoring festival. You're going to score your little papyrus tiles you picked up. You're going to score your heart and feather, your achieved goals, your sarcophagus, your little obelisk track, and then the big pyramid and the little pyramids. And you're going to do that whole thing 3 times, and then the player with the most points wins. So as I mentioned earlier on, this to me is very much a kind of a points engine builder. There is not really any actual engine building in the game per se. There's a little bit of income, but it's very minor. But it really is about trying to set yourself up each round to score as many points as possible. And if you have listened to our podcast before, probably know that all of us, especially Sam though, loves true engine building games where you do feel the sense of getting stronger, progression, and round to round feeling different from the rounds before. So this game, let's just say, is lacking that in spades, really. It does make up for it in other areas. We're going to talk about stuff as well. But how do you guys feel about the engine building lack, but also kind of how that plays out for you, I guess?
I think it's worth saying that there's a very small amount of engine building in the boat track and the obelisk, where you can get a little bit of income once you've moved your boats up and moved up that track. You get some fish income and some whatever that other resource is called. Shem mentioned it like 5 seconds ago. Hecker. So, I mean, there's a very small amount of like resource engine building there, and like you can also just not do those things, so then not have that income. So that's possible, but it's very, very minor. Yeah, I tend to not like in games where you kind of have points engine building versus other engine building, where you're like made to choose. I don't find it as annoying in this game where everything's points engine building. So I don't have that same kind of like dislike just off the bat. Like, I think when everything is engine building points, then you're deciding which path to go down, and that's just the whole game. So it's like it's the identity of the game. So it doesn't kind of annoy me as much as, or like, I don't, yeah. In games where it's like pure engine building and then there's like a few ways that you can like points engine build, it's kind of like those points engine building ways just don't feel as good as the others, even though they might be super powerful. They just don't feel as fun. But in this case, like the whole thing's about points engine building. So I found it reasonably fun, and I didn't kind of have that tension that I have in kind of engine building games.
That's kind of what I was kind of hinting towards, that it's lacking the engine building. And for a midweight to heavy Euro game, that feels almost sacrilegious. Like, these games need engine building because they're big, involved games, and you should feel quite invested in the game as you're playing it. But it's still fun. And that's kind of like where it's a real odd one. I enjoy playing this game a fair bit. And it is very, in a weird way, accessible, despite, like its sprawling presence on the table. There's a lot of moving parts, maybe too many moving parts. But it's somewhat fun, but it is weirdly lacking like the one thing you probably should have in a big hour to 2 hour long game, right? Like, it's kind of strange.
Yeah. I think I definitely feel the most strongly about this towards the negative direction, but I first want to talk about, and we try not with this podcast to do reviews of games. We want to really get into the mind of the designer and assess the game from what we can see as the design intent. We're obviously guessing and pointing out key and interesting things going on with the innovation in the game and the different mechanisms. So I'll point out that the game does do a really good job of having lots of different mini games. There's all these different systems to interact with, right? And they all, as we're talking about, generate points. But you've got the rows and columns with the mummies. You've got all these different tracks and bumping and all that sort of thing going on. There's objectives, which are really fun to fulfill and feel like you've actually done something cool. There's blocking going on. And there's the pyramids, but there's also this pyramid type system with the goods that you place in the temple, where when you collect the goods, you place them on your player board. They start off in the first row, but once you've done enough of them, you can place them in the second and third row. And then after you've placed them on your board, when you place them out on the main board, or when you sell those goods, you get all the benefits based on the tier that they're on. So that's like a really interesting system. That's a really cool mini game. So I think the game does a great job of making those subsystems in the game interesting, and like some of them are novel and unique. But for me, when I play the game, I sort of see behind the curtain and I'm just like, they all end up with the same result. And none of these make me feel something different as a player. I feel like I want to explore something different. I don't feel more powerful for having done this or this. It's just all of these are going to generate X points per round. So that's the part that, and I can unpack that a little more, but Shem, I'm interested in what you have to say on that.
The word mini games kind of got me. They very, very much are like mini games, which makes me think more of like roll and writes, where you've got like a very simple system to engage with the interface or whatever with the game, but there are these little kind of puzzles you can play on the outskirts of the core game, which is, it's a tried and true thing that works with roll and writes. But we talk about mini games a lot, and even Euro games, but I guess I hadn't really thought about this in this way too much. But it is purely that, right? It's like there's a very simple economy behind the game. The action taking is like, it's very nice and it works really well. We'll get into that later, but it's simple in a way and how it works. But there's all these different little toys to play with on the outskirts of the game. Yeah, and to your point, they might just all result in the same outcome in a way. They don't feel different as far as like agency or player expression, but they do feel like different toys to play with.
Yeah.
Physical, especially physical toys to play with. So there is some kind of fun that comes from that. Maybe it's not like the fun of diving in deep to a game, but it's the fun of the tactile nature of it.
Let's just flow with this idea of mini games while we're there. And I'll come back to this question of the action system, because I've got more to say on that and the engine building. But we've done games that I would say have mini games in them and subsystems that you have to learn. And perhaps two that I would say are most prominent in is Viscounts of the West Kingdom and Ezra and Nehemiah, where you have these 3 or 4 very distinct paths with their own little rule sets and ways you interact with those areas of the game, those mini games. To Shem, but also maybe Zach as well, like when designing games, how do you dream up all of these little mini games? because it's not enough just to have the core action taking system. You know, this is how you take an action, but it's like, how do you then dream up what the actions are and how to make them feel distinct, how to make unique mini games?
I would presume this came from a theme first angle. So they would have think, oh, we've got to have mummies in there. We've got to have the temple, the pyramids. And then it's about how do those things interact? What is their system? Like very much how you would design a roll and write game. I mean, I haven't actually designed one, but watching Bobby do his, especially, and helping him with his games, like he will break down the theme very like into parts and go, all right, there needs to be like in say the Anarchy, there needs to be Markle Mass in the game, there needs to be siege weapons in the game. Like, how do I add them into the game? How does the player have access to them, and how do they function when you use them? It seems like that for me with this game, where it's like, oh, okay, we've got these mummies. All right, well, obviously you have to, go through the process of mummification, and then they become the sarcophagus, and then you place them into some kind of area on the board where they stay forever. And what does that look like? And how do you get points from that? How do you generate stuff from that? And then you've got, the temples, or how do you place things in the temples? How do you give you goods? And all that kind of thing, I think would come from theme. That's just my 2 cents on it, at least. And I'm guessing that's what they did. The challenge that I think we found it with our games too, Sam, is that how do you make those feel different is the biggest challenge. Like, we did it with Paladins as well. We were trying to make 6 different actions for that game originally. Like, how do you make them all feel different? And in the end, well, that's a very hard challenge to make a game not overwhelming as well. So Commission and Garrison and Paladins are the same thing. They both place out a token onto this shared board. They just have a slightly different point difference between them. And then Attack and Convert interact with the same space, right? The same card. They are functioning differently how you take them, but they're kind of a similar puzzle. In this way, like the Sphinxes and the mummies are the same thing. Like, they're doing a very similar thing. Like, very minor difference, but very much like the Sphinxes don't generate points, for example, round to round, but they're very similar.
And having some similarities with the mini games themselves can be a really good thing, because when teaching the game, when I teach Paladins, it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you Commission and Garrison, or I'll teach you Commission and then be like, Garrison was just like that one. And that's a nice kind of breath of fresh air. You're not having to learn 6 full things. Maybe you're learning 3 or 4 full things for how to interact. So you mentioned looking at it thematically, maybe for this game might have been one of the ways they did it. Is that what we did in the past, Shem, with Viscounts, the castle, the manuscripts, the buildings, and Ezra and Nehemiah as well, the different paths there? Did we approach it thematically or what?
I don't think so for Paladins. Like, I think that was very much, we had the puzzle of the stats, the attributes first, and we had the magical triangle thing we shared before, where you had the 3 different stats and the 2 different resources and how they correlate. So it was like, I had to try and figure out, all right, I've got influence and I want to create faith. Well, what action would do that thematically? We had the systems before the theme. You do kind of feel like sometimes you're shoehorning the theme in a little bit. Ezra and Nehemiah would have been the opposite for us, I think, where we would have had the theme first and try and figure out, all right, what does it look like? You're going to be doing the Torah. What does it look like in the game? You're going to be building walls. What does that look like? So those actions are very different. And there's only 3 of them as well. Whereas like Paladins has 6, Men-Nefer has, 6 to 8, I'd say. I'm just on top of my head.
Yeah, it's
quite a lot of actions in the game. Different things, different systems. So it's really hard to make them shine because, as you said, if they're all different, then that's a lot of rules to teach and a lot of things to get lost in. And that can be true of, say, the Anarchy or Hadrian's Wall. When you get onto that right sheet of those games, the person may already be lost from the left sheet. And they've got to go through all these little systems, and that's a lot. But once you get into it, it's worth it. This game, it's not a lot to get into it because they're so similar, right? Like, it's fairly easy to teach.
Yeah.
But then you've got to say, is it worth it? But again, like, is the lack of rules making for a rewarding experience and a game you want to keep going back to explore more? Does the fun hold up, I guess, is the other question over time.
Yeah, so another question then on the mini games is, okay, so dreaming them up is one thing, and you might take like a thematic approach. And even with Viscounts, the castle mechanism for me was actually inspired by a video game. It's a video game called League of Legends Teamfight Tactics. The idea is that you need 3 level 1 cards, and once you've got 3 level 1 cards, they all disappear and they turn into a level 2 card. Well, we adapted that. We added some movement, all this different stuff. But that concept I really liked, and that turned into this castle mechanism in Viscounts. So that's how we go about dreaming them up, maybe thematically, maybe mechanical inspiration from other things, and the types of engine building that we would like to see in games. Like Ezra and Nehemiah, there was obviously a thematic inspiration for teaching the Torah, but there's also mechanical one, tech trees. I love tech trees. Tech trees are good fun, which create a lot of variety from game to game. But what I want to ask is then, okay, you've got these different mini games games in your game, how do you kind of like integrate them and how do you balance them when they are vastly different? And I think with this game here, the balancing of them, I think they did a good job, and it wouldn't have been so hard when they're all resulting in the same types of stuff. They're resulting in either giving you points income or giving you something that will give you points income, like boosting the feather track or the other one, is it shield or the heart or whatever? So those will end up giving you points income. But when they're giving you vastly different things, how do you go about balancing these different mini games in your designs?
See, I think, Sam, like, especially when you and I are co-designing these types of games with widely different paths to victory, I guess we'd say, is what we try and aim for usually in our games. And again, Men-Nefer has got a lot going on, like a lot of paths. We often try and go to 3 or 4 paths. With, often there's like side things you can do to try to tailor your play experience. But usually, like Game of Viscounts or Ezra Nehemiah only has 3 or 4 paths to pursue, and you might balance one of them extremely or do 2 of them together or whatever it might be. Anyway, I think we approach it trying to make them feel different from the start. That's usually the challenge. And it's often the roadblock to getting the game to the table for us, I think, when we're like, oh, cool, we've got this idea for an action taking system. We know the theme. What the heck are we doing? Like, are we placing things on a board? Are we tucking cards? What are we doing? Like, it's hard to kind of get to that point. I mean, the castle for you obviously was a big inspiration or a good jumping in point because you had an idea for a mechanism which created a physical piece in the game, which we could then sculpt the game around. So it worked really well to kind of fuel the rest of it. The buildings of Viscounts were like, they're pretty stock standard Euro stuff.
Yeah.
Put out a piece on the board, get the thing you cover, and then we added a little extra kind of connection bonus type thing that goes on. And also what you reveal, I guess your playable reveal stuff as well. But that's that's been done a lot. We love that stuff in games, but it's been run for a long time. And then the manuscripts was kind of stock standard set collection with some wrinkles of immediates and in-game scoring bonuses and stuff. But really the castle was kind of the unique piece that sculpted the game for Viscounts. I think for balancing, it's like you kind of go in with your rough numbers. That's how I'd usually approach a game like this and go, that's probably about right. And then you just play the crap out of the game and just tweak it over and over. That's like the best way to do it. I think if you go far too spreadsheety, you end up, in a way, coming up with a game that might not feel that inspired or that interesting because it just ends up being pure numbers. And if I put this thing here, I get a point. If I put this thing here, I get a point or 2 points. And those games are great for teaching. I look out for those kind of games for my kids, like games that are very obvious how to get points. But for someone who's looking for a meatier Euro game, like you said earlier, Sam, you see behind the curtain and it's not as fun because you're like, oh, I can see everything. You kind of want this like hidden veil, lens and veil, where you can't quite see all the systems and there's too much going on to really comprehend what you're doing. There's too much integration between the paths that it gets blurry. You don't know quite the best move, and that's the fun space to play in, I think.
Yeah, so I haven't designed a lot of these games with lots of mini games, but just talking about general balance in balancing different paths, what I prefer is when not all the paths are equally strong, but they're also not equally easy. So where you have this kind of difference where some paths have a higher reward, but there's higher risk. Like statistically, less people are going to win the game with that path. But if someone does it really well, they can win the game against another path, which will win more often, but doesn't have that high ceiling, right? So it's kind of like you have some high floor, low ceiling paths. You have some low floor, high ceiling paths. You kind of have this kind of mix of things. And that's one thing that I'm going to, at least in the plays that I have, seems to me that was a bit disappointing in this game is I felt like the boat strategy of fulfilling these goals was really fun and I was always drawn into it. But it just felt like it was quite hard because you had to be fulfilling other goals in the game, and it didn't feel like you were getting the payoff in terms of points and reward because you were kind of like limited each round. You got new goals, so they were like all the ones that were taken, you got ones that gave more points and were harder to do, and so there was this natural ramp up over the thing, which was okay. But I think in the last game we played, like I ended up getting 19 points from it, so yeah, it has a slightly higher ceiling than like say those tracks where you get 18 points at the top, but I only got 19 points in the last round, and I think the round before that I probably got like 10 points. I think Sam, by the end of the second round, was at the top of the building track, and he just got 18 points that round, 18 points the next round, and it's like he just needed to get that building stat. Like he just needs to get that one thing that moves your marker along, right? He didn't need to do anything else other than find that wherever he could. And so it feels like it's not requiring, well, it's requiring skill in terms of finding those everywhere, but it's like you're not having to like chain things together to be able to unlock a certain thing. You're just finding that stat anywhere and you move up and you get points. So it felt like those two kind of tracks to me, and just in general, the boat track didn't feel like it had that right kind of payoff for the amount of effort you had to put in to do it. So that for me was an unsatisfying kind of conclusion to the game. Like I enjoyed doing those goals, but then at the end you're like, well, what did I get out of it? So I don't know. Like obviously I've played the game twice, and so maybe these aren't like overarching conclusions on the whole balance of the game, but that was definitely my player feeling after playing it, and the feeling of the balance that there was.
You have to wonder, like with the play testing, we find it in our ones. We always create a bit of a meta at the table of how we play the game, and so we'll find certain things are far too strong, we'll pull them down. Other things are too weak, so we'll lift them up. But you just don't know who's going to play this game, eh? Like when you release the game, who's going to play it, and what is their go-to play style? Like maybe with this game, over multiple tests, they realized that actually just going building the pyramid, the slightly mindless strategy of just like race that track, maybe that's weak. Like maybe it actually is weak overall. But for those players that like are trying to be tricky and explore and do stuff that we might try and do in games, they end up losing because they haven't quite mastered that kind of play style yet. Whereas the pyramid one's like, it's a sure thing for your first few games, that kind of feeling, right? You're talking about the ceilings and stuff, floors.
Yeah.
I've only won this game once. I played it 6 times, I think, and twice solo. I've almost finished around the same score every time, about 72-ish. And I've always lost every game, like fully lost every multiplayer game. And I lost my first solo game. I just won my last solo game, and it was doing the mindless strategy of just racing the pyramid track. So I can't, yeah, I don't know. I'm always drawn to like the sphinxes in the game. I want to like do these big, Brucey, like awesome actions, but they don't pay out in points so much. There's lots of things in this game where like I want to come back to it and actually try new stuff. But then there is that whole thing of like you've kind of seen behind the curtain, and like, is it that interesting? It's a strange game to me. You have thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly that Zach was too polite. I mean, you used the word mindless. I think what he was trying to say was that I had a brain dead strategy. And he lost to it. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I just think perhaps the balance questions around the boat strategy aside, I sort of have felt that like kind of everything has a similar potential because they're all rewarding you very similar stuff. So I actually think for the most part, they did a really good job with the balance. I do think that if something were to have a higher ceiling, and I agree, Zach, I think it's a great thing to put in games, to have some strategies that have higher ceilings that have a, much stronger degree of execution required. I think those are cool because it's like a chase thing. It's a thing to go after, It's a thing that you shouldn't be able to get every time. I mean, we put it in Wayfarers. It's a little bit of a luck element in Wayfarers with the sun and the moon. Like those cards are supposed to have an insanely high ceiling. That's the point. And so we like that, we like that, but you're not going to be able to see them every game. And I think having things to go after that are either rare or hard to pull off, or opponents can block you, or some combination of those things is good. And so of all of the strategies, I think that the boat one should be the one that has the most reward. And I haven't played it enough or pursued the boat strategy enough to know if it's underpowered, but it maybe seems a little, because it's like you've got these objectives, these things you need to achieve, and they might not be consistent with doing the boat strategy. So you also are told to do other strategies, and it takes you actions to pick up these things themselves, and then you flip them over and you get that point income, rather than, some other actions you just boost along this track and you get the point income. But those questions aside, I'm not saying it's unbalanced. I'm not sure. I think the boats should have the highest ceiling. I end up, that whole thing around seeing behind the curtain. I think for me, the thing that really isn't pleasing is that the game very much, even though there are all these paths, even though there's mini games and toys and stuff, it feels very much like it's on rails. And Shem, you mentioned kind of ending the same points, ending the game with the same amount of points roughly every game. I think I might have as well, but more so than that, it's not just the value of points that I got, the quantity of points that I got. It's the feeling that I'm not sure there was more juice to squeeze out of that one. Like, I don't end the game feeling like I misplayed, or, if only I'd sequenced in this way or that. I'm sure there were inefficiencies. I'm definitely not a perfect gamer, but I don't leave the game with regret or wanting to have got more out of it, because I know that I was given 27 actions, exactly 27 actions, right? And for me, that kind of thing is something that I don't love in games, when you've got an exact number of actions that you do. Now, so many games do it, and so there's a lot of caveats and ways that designers can get around it to design it in a way that I like it. Not that that should be their goal, to please me, but I think it's not only that there's 27 actions, it's that there's exactly 9 printed tile actions. And there's exactly 9 collect tile actions where you trigger the bonuses on the boards, the slots the tiles are from. And there's exactly 9 track bump actions where you do the action based on your worker and your scarab beetle on the track. And so within those 27 actions that you must have, you must do each one of them an exact number of times. And so there's no wiggle room or agency around that. Sure, you can pick different actions, but there's not a lot more to squeeze out of them. The other thing is that there's no free actions. I actually like in a game where, like Cooper Island is a great example of this. Castles of Burgundy is also a great example of this, where occasionally you feel like you are gaming the system a little bit and you're cheesing some extra actions. You get to squeeze out a little bit more from the game than the number of turns you think you're supposed to have. Like you get these bonus actions, these extra workers, things like that. But this one does just feel, as I said, on rails. It's disguised by all the stuff, I think, that's going on. There's lots of stuff that's going on. There's tracks here and there, pieces moving about and stuff. But say with the printed tile actions that you take, right? You can't make those ones stronger. You just do the thing that's on them. The collect tile actions, the ones where you pick up from the board and you do the bonus on the slot, you can't make those stronger either. I mean, if you spend fish, you've got more options to choose from, and perhaps the ones where you spend more fish are slightly better. But you're not leveraging where you are in the track for either of those two types of actions. So they end up feeling kind of like, oh, how do I actually make this better? How do I make this more strong? I don't know. And my other little gripe with that collect tile action is that it's always your last action of every round. And it's kind of like the least interesting one. It's like the least powerful, the least fun one. It's always like kind of set up stuff like unlock a mummy or maybe move a boat or something like that. But it's not the powerful lock this thing in to score more points. So for a game that is kind of about sequencing and it's about like trying to feel smart, I ultimately just don't feel like that I can squeeze more out of it, that I did my sequencing wrong because it's so restricted, it's so on rails. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but that's kind of how I end up feeling. Like there weren't other paths that I wanted to explore. I didn't watch what you guys were doing and think, oh, that's really interesting, that's really cool and powerful. I want to try that next time, or I want to try this exploit next time. There's none of that sort of stuff for me, which makes me feel powerful, smart, and want to try it again.
Yeah, I kind of agree in terms of the replayability because like I had a good time playing it. Both times, like I enjoyed playing it. I've seen people say, "Oh, it's a big heavy game." I don't feel like it's a very heavy game. It doesn't feel very heavy to me. Like it wasn't very hard to get into. Even like we played it quite far apart and I'd like pretty much forgotten most of it, but I'm just like, oh, what do these symbols mean? And like you said what the symbols mean. I'm like, sweet, let's play it. Like because once you understand the symbology, it's really not at all that complicated. So yeah, like there's nothing really bringing me back to it. I enjoyed playing it. I guess I would be happy to play it, but I'm not thinking about the game and being like, oh man, I really want to play that again. I really want to just go up that pyramid building path and build the pyramid, you know? Like, I don't have that desire to come back and try another path, really. If someone asked me to play it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good time. I do really like the action taking system, but I was told that it's the same as Bitoku. Is that right?
A very similar style, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So for me, that was quite like a cool design.
I do that same feeling of like, what else is there left to squeeze from the game? And could I have played better? Well, obviously, because I lost. Obviously, I could have played better. But then the other question is like, how would I have played better? Like, it comes down to intelligence at that point. Like, it's not so much about like finding different paths. It's about being the most clever player at the table and seeing every little move possible. And that's very much like a chess type way of playing and like really finding the perfect move every turn. And for me, that's not where I find fun in board games. So I find fun in just pushing buttons and exploring and having fun and moving bits around. So I'm not going to want to sit down and play this game until I can hit 90 points. Like that's not a thing I want to try and achieve. And if I keep coming back to the game and getting 72 points and losing the multiplayer games, it's going to feel quite defeating. And like, why would I keep playing it? Because I'm not getting better and I don't know how to get better. Or at least in other games, like if I get smashed in another game, I'm like, I know I misplayed and I know I can get better and I want to get better. But when you feel like you've done all you can do, then it's a slightly different feeling. Yeah.
Just talking about that, I kind of agree with, I don't really like chess either and that kind of having to figure out every move possible. What I enjoy in games is like just picking a strategy and just trying to do it the best possible. And I feel like in other games, there's more room for you to screw up because of like the engine building thing, right? There's more room for you to make mistakes in every strategy than in this one.
Yeah.
It feels like. at least that's how it feels. And so in a game, I'll be like, pick a strategy, try and do it the best. And I'll end the game being like, oh man, I could have done that better. Like maybe next time I play, I'm going to do that same strategy again and just try and do it better. And with this one, it's like I finish it and I don't have that feeling at all being like, oh, maybe I should try and do that same strategy again. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe, you know, next time I play, I should try and do something different, you know? And that's not as exciting because I want to be able to get enjoyment out of the same path multiple times in a game, you know?
Yeah.
On the topic of the mini games and this kind of stuff as well, I think like the ships and the temple are kind of like two parts that do shine quite well. Like
Agree.
they do feel quite different.
Yeah.
And there is room to really optimize and play differently in those areas, like how you place out your goods, which goods you get, which benefits you trigger. The weird part for me with the ships is how once you sail past the port, you can't go back and better tiles might appear behind you. That's a little bit of a weird part of the game.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to pace out your ships, right? Like slowly let them sail down, not rush them all at once. But aside from those two, I think a lot of the other stuff feels a bit samey. But yeah, that's just back to the other discussion before. But also it comes back to that kind of mastery and replayability and coming back to explore more. I think those two areas you could come back to and explore and try and get better. Because I can't remember if I sold every good. I definitely filled my goods board and sold most of them. But that feeling of like I could have sold one more, like, is a good feeling in the game. I think if that feeling was in all the other areas, then there'd be a lot more to explore. The mummies, the sphinxes, the pyramids, like there's just not that much point of difference in them, and that feeling of like, oh, I could have played that part better. It doesn't really shine in those areas so much. So I can see why, Zach, you keep coming back to the ships, because it's probably is the more fun part to try and get better at.
Yeah, I think next time I played, I'd probably just play exactly what I played last time, which was the temple and the ships, because they were kind of fun. And like as you say, they're kind of the two most interesting parts. I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not that interested in, like, I think I placed down one Sphinx and it's like, oh, cool, I got a powerful action, but it's like, it's not really building into anything. And then the mummies thing, I think the first time I played, I did the building, and definitely I like the other building track, which lets you like lock in those in-game scoring things. I always enjoy those, like those. You know, there's this in-game scoring goal. Okay, cool. I'll lock that in and I'll focus on that and try and do really well. Like I enjoy that. The other building track, which is just like the points generator, I don't find that at all like interesting.
On a more positive note, I think one area of the game does really well, I've kind of already hinted at the whole accessibility part, does really well at just being really teachable.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a bit with SETI as well on our podcast, how it's like, there seems to be this approach in some modern Euro games where it really is about trying to ramp up the accessibility, because big, heavy Euro games that, you know, we've designed and published them, they can be quite off-putting and intimidating to a lot of people. How do you get those people to even try a game like this? So this game and SETI alike are definitely trying to give a bigger game feel with less rules. So you can teach it a lot easier, get into it. I mean, SETI has more depth, far more depth and more expression for players than Men-Nefer. But I think they're trying to achieve a similar thing where like you give this big table presentation, but it's actually not that hard to get into. So it's doing really well with that. But I think the other area it does well is in the layered tactical decisions. So every decision kind of has a few different layers to it where it's not just about, oh, this is getting me points, this is getting me a fish I need, it's, you know, one thing I need. It's like, oh, if I do this now, then it's going to cost me a fish. If I do it later, it's 3 fish. But if I don't do this now, then I can't get that tile I need right now. Like there's a lot of things where like it's all about immediate access and tactical decisions in the game, where I love that stuff in games. It's in Spades and like Paladins, for example, where it's like, oh, if I don't recruit that person now, then they might remove them, or if I don't get that flip debt spot on the main board, then someone else will steal it. That kind of feeling I love in games. So this game has that as well, where it's not just about like what am I doing, but when am I doing it? And there's a lot of reasons behind like why I would do it now versus later, which I think was fun. That's pretty much almost the only interaction in the game. There is little bits of blocking and stuff going on, like the ships and the mummies and stuff, but the main interaction really is in that decision space where you put your workers down and, you know, where you go, when you go there, and when you move it over, that kind of thing, because it's all about the cost stuff and the timing of those, which I found quite interesting as a puzzle. But yeah, and how you guys feel about that kind of stuff, the tactical layered decisions.
Yeah, I like it. I think it is kind of the worker placement and movement part. The strategy of that is kind of obvious. Like in that it's kind of put your fat bum down there, do not move across. If you can, like if you can still get all your sequencing done perfectly, put your fat bum down there, do not move across until someone moves in, then move across to make sure that they're going to have to pay both times because you're going to be first there and, first to the other side as well. And then, sometimes you're stalling, waiting for someone to move out to free up a slot, or you want to move in first before they do. So if you can manage your sequencing perfectly whilst being the most annoying to other players, then that's obviously the best thing to do.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what we would try to do in our games, to make sure that others need to pay more fish. And then if they have fish woes, then they might have to take actions that gain them fish rather than gaining more points income. That's kind of like the flow-on effect. I would like it, as I said, with having to do 9 of this, 9 of this, 9 of this. I think it's interesting at first, but it does sort of end up feeling like you're playing the same sequence over and over again. Like you don't actually have to take a tile as your last one. That's right. It is always your later type actions will be picking up those tiles, and they feel like they're the weakest of those actions. I do like the layered part that you mentioned though in the first 2 rounds, not in the third round, but the first 2 rounds, where you're not just, when you pick those tiles, you're not just thinking about what bonus do I want now. More importantly, you're thinking about which action do I want to lean into next round. And so if you really are trying to do the brain dead strategy that I did, or any strategy where you do it to the extreme, you need to be seeking out those actions that you're going to do.
I think that whole like placing the worker, moving the worker, and the 3 different actions is cool because you are also worried about other things, like you're trying to match up your symbols with the picking up the tiles, or you're trying to, pick up the right action, as Sam says. So sometimes you just can't sequence perfectly and be as annoying. The one thing I would say is that, as Sam said, like the worker placement and movement is really obvious how to hurt people, whereas the other things that would maybe add tension with that aren't as obvious what other people want, I think, often. Like maybe they are when you get better at the game and you see what strategies people do and you're like, okay, he's going to move because he's not going to place there because he's going to take that action next. And so, I'll place that. You might get better at the game and figure out what people are going to do. But I feel like that worker one about like placing down and then waiting till someone else places and then moving is the most obvious area where it's easy to figure out how to mess with people. All the other ways that there is the interaction, it's harder to figure out how to mess with people, which kind of lowers a bit of the tension between those different actions.
The moving across part, you really are setting up wanting to take an action that's quite strong, right? So like placing a sphinx or placing a mummy is some obvious ones. So often you need to set that up with something else. Like you need the action to move the mummy across first. And I was just going out of my way to make sure that when I moved my scarab across for that little action of like placing a sphinx, that I'm not just using that to move a sphinx. Like that would be horrible. So I would take actions where I'm like, oh, if I place this tile here, that lets me move a sphinx now, and then I can move this guy across. Or if I pick up this tile now, then I can move my mummy across. And so there was that consideration where it wasn't just always that obvious for me to like always go down and across or whatever. But obviously that's what you want to be doing. But there was definitely times where I'm like, oh, I can't do that yet because I need to place this tile first, but I can't place that tile yet because that guy's in the way. It's going to cost me a fish if I go there because that's what I want to do. So there's this nice little puzzle of like trying to figure out your 3 main actions in the game. Let's say it that way. The 3 actions where you move your worker across are really important because they're your big, strongest actions. Of the 9 of the round, those 3 are really important. So you want to make sure that those happen at the exact right time, that you've got everything you need. It's not going to cost you that much and you've got all the stuff prepared. So I like how those things integrate. And I agree that some parts of it are kind of weaker than others and stuff. And like which tile you take might be somewhat relevant sometimes. But yeah, I quite enjoyed that puzzle.
Yeah, me too.
I want to come back to this concept of having an exact number of turns in the game. So not just an exact number of rounds, but an exact number of turns and not really any free actions or anything like that either. So I said that I don't really love it in games, or like the game has to do something special, kind of hide that from me, I guess. Coimbra is one that does it that I really like, where you get these little bonus actions, these other cool effects that come in that sort of disguises the fact that I'm getting set number of actions throughout the game. We've done this in one game, I believe, Shem. Actually, there's others, but we've done this in one game that I can think of, Ezra and Nehemiah. You very much do have 18 actions throughout the game, plus the Sabbaths. Both of you, what do you guys think about this? Is this a good thing in game design? Do you have similar issues with me around wanting to be able to like sort of squeeze more out of it than the game is sort of allowing me to? Like, what are you guys' thoughts? And what went into Ezra and Nehemiah? Why did we end up landing the plane there?
Well, I think the difference with Ezra and Nehemiah is how you have the auxiliary actions. So There are 18 turns, but essentially you could have 36 actions in a way. Like, because if you're playing really well, every turn you should be either flipping a development tile or trading, which is an action. So, and there's so much room for expression there, despite the expression from the different paths. So that feels quite different from how Men-Nefer handles it, because like this is far more like rigid. And there's no, like you said, no free actions at all. No, like, oh, you could always spend a hecka to do this or spend a fish to get that at any time, like all that kind of stuff. So Ezra Maya is very different. In my mind, it's more like the round is very structured, the turns are very structured, but what you can do in that space is quite open.
Well, I can speak to Chaos Order because that essentially everyone could technically do everything, but what Chaos Order does is it has, once again, auxiliary actions. So every time there's an action phase, some people can afford to do the auxiliary action and they're going to spend their resources on that. And not everyone is going to be able to afford to do every auxiliary action. Not everyone is necessarily going to be able to afford to do every action as well. So maybe they're going to have to pick to skip actions. So that kind of already just adds to being like, oh yes, everyone has the same sequence of possible actions. Then some people aren't going to be doing some of them and some people aren't going to be doing others. And then the other factor which adds in more variability is the research tracks. Whereas in this game, I think there's like maybe 2 ways that you can boost your tracks when you're not moving your worker across in Men-Nefer. And there's like a couple of ways that you can get that little scarab symbol that lets you move one of your tracks, which is like a little bit of engine building, right? But mostly in Men-Nefer, you're moving the track when you move your worker across. So normally I think everyone's going to get a similar number of track bumps, right? Whereas in Chaos Order, that's not the case. Some people will just like race ahead on the research. So then their actions are just going to be way stronger than others in their certain actions. But then there's the opposite thing, is that maybe because they're spending so much time researching, they don't have control on the map. So there's that whole tension going on. So I think having like set rounds can be good. You just need to add ways for players to diverge from one another, I think is the key thing. So that it doesn't feel like we're all walking or running at the same pace, but we're kind of going in different directions, even though we're following the same structure.
I think the thing that I'm realizing is that for me, I like feeling like there were possible actions that I either missed out on because of my poor sequencing or I couldn't have afforded to do because I didn't have enough resources. That makes me feel at the end of the game, there were opportunities there. Like, I don't like feeling that I took every opportunity, weirdly. I kind of want to feel like, oh, I missed something there. Maybe I could have done it a different way, got a little bit more resources out of this action. Then when I took that turn, I could have bought this extra bonus thing, this luxury item that would have made me even more powerful, more strong, you know? But so I think that's a personal thing that games that have fixed number of turns can cause issue with, where if I really do feel like I did my allotted turns and I did every action on all of those turns, then I end up feeling a little flat at the end around wanting to pursue mastery and play again and get more points or higher score.
I was looking at some of my sort of higher rated games in my collection. A lot of them don't have set rounds, or set turns, I should say. But the ones that stand out that do have it but have something different going on is Underwater Cities and Cooper Island. Underwater Cities, it is a set number of turns, right? There's no room for any room there. But much like Ezra and Nehemiah, the expression there is like, how powerful are these actions? Can you actually make them as good as possible? And the cards add a lot of chaos to the game because, you know, when you take that green slot action, do you have the right green card to play down? Is it good for your strategy? There's so much room to misplay in that game as well.
Yes, yeah.
And with Cooper Island, Cooper Island, in a sense you have set turns, but you can opt in for more turns, but it's going to cost you food. So there's that thing of like, you could get more turns if you want by getting more workers. You're going to have to pay for it at some point. And that adds that level of like, when is the right time to get this worker? Is it worth getting it in round 4? I don't know. Like, it's hard to actually know the right way to play. So that kind of breaks the whole common turns kind of thing, or the set number of turns in a way. But every other game, just looking at an old list of mine, top 30 from a year or so ago, every other game in the top 20, I think it is, at least, doesn't have set turns. So obviously it's a flavor thing, or like a personal flavor thing. I like games with some wiggle room, but yeah, it's interesting.
I do have sort of maybe one final topic, which is not normally something that I would think about, but this game has had me thinking about it. And that is that, one, I think it does a really good job with the graphic design and the layout of the board. Like, everything's there. It's big and it's beautiful and it looks really Egyptian. And I think Sam, our artist and graphic designer, saw the board on the table, was like, wow, this is really cool. And I think that's great. One thing that I've noticed is that I actually sorely miss characters. There's not really people, there's not really characters, there's not really personality in this game. And this is something that we try to put in our games, and actually inventors is a point of conversation for a game perhaps where that was missed a little. But to me, it actually just matters as a player. I've sort of realized that, oh, the world feels kind of not lived in. It feels kind of dead. Like we're playing with these mummies and these sphinxes, which are not alive. And so it makes the game feel not alive. I don't know. Is this something worth discussing? Like, why do we put characters in games? Is this just a me thing? Do I want people? I didn't know this was important to me until kind of now.
Well, I'm not a huge like immersive narrative kind of board gamer. I'm quite happy with maths and systems and Euro games. But, board games are a form of storytelling. Either it's actually telling you a narrative or you're creating it as you play, in a sense, as a player. And I mean, can you imagine reading a book with no characters, right? Like a book with just setting outside forces and no actual heroes or no villains. Like,
yeah,
it would be quite boring, right? So you kind of want to have these faces and these personalities that you can put yourself in their shoes, I think is the general thing of storytelling. Where like, I can imagine myself in this place being that person or knowing that person, and it helps you understand the world more when you see someone living in it, I think. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of games like this, right, that don't have heavy character driven kind of artwork and stuff. And I think it's been a thing for us because early on, a lot of my games like Shipwrights and Raiders were all about like your crew and like hard play, and having characters is fun because you kind of connect to them.
Yeah.
When I came to do Explorers, which was mostly tile laying, like that's when I was like, oh, there's not many characters, but they're able to get in there through player powers. So you do actually play as a character and you hopefully feel kind of like that character as you're playing the game. But I mean, I wonder if the heavier the game goes, the less you need those characters. Is that a thing? Like, is there like a spectrum of like, you think of a game like Lisboa, super engaging game. There are just 3 little plebs that you see characters of in the game, the king and the queen or whatever they are. And all the cards you're playing, they're not characters, right? They're just kind of blueprinty illustrations of things.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So there's not really much character going on in that game, but man, you're engaged in the story of the game and what's going on and as a player, because I think as the player, you are the character more so than anything. Whereas a lot of the games that we design, you are kind of like the outside force moving characters around in the game. You're not playing as this one person. And I know for a lot of people, it's quite important to be that one person. Like, I remember hearing feedback about Viscounts that people loved the fact that they had a horse that was them. Like, this is me moving around a board, because they feel way more engaged being that thing versus a game, I guess, like Paladins, where you are this outside force that's choosing the Paladin for the round and putting out monks and outposts and stuff. And you're kind of more like, I want to say, like a god-like figure in the game, or like an outside force in the game that you don't feel as connected. So there is definitely a weird spectrum there of like, if there's not much engagement from you as a player from the outside force angle, which Men-Nefer is kind of that angle where like you are this outside force building up Egypt, then you kind of want to have characters that you can see, like the people that you're impacting with your actions, right? Like, I'm up here doing the stuff and I can see the people doing things. Like, that's kind of the fun part. But whereas the other version of like Lisboa, where you feel like you're on the ground and you're doing the work yourself, you still feel engaged. So I think the character's been lacking in Men-Nefer is definitely, a negative for the experience of the game, because you are just feeling like you're looking up high, building up Egypt, but you can't see the people. So what are you really doing? Like, who are you impacting? Yeah. What are you doing in the game? So what's the story being told here? Just that mummies are getting placed on the board and that ships are moving along. And yeah, you kind of feel that the human factor is kind of missing, right? What you're getting at.
I'm pleased because I thought it was just me. Like, I thought it's quite possible that that's just a very personal thing. But yeah, I'm even surprised I noticed it.
There's priestesses or whatever walking in to make offerings, okay? They're alive. Right?
You've named them? You've named them.
I don't know if they're priestesses, but the little meeples Janice. Walking into the temple, are not dead. There we go.
They're made of wood. They're alive and kicking.
Some of them did arrive in my copy with their legs broken, but
oh no,
published. I did replace them. So that was nice.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of agree. I think it's worth mentioning that inventors didn't have any characters in the base game.
Yeah, totally.
But you guys did then add them with the expansion, right? So I think there was like, you must have kind of been conscious of how it would have been good to add some people into the game.
Yeah. If you know our games, they always have for those games like 4 characters on the box, one on each side. Oh, so 4, now it's 8, I think.
2 on each side, yeah, I think so.
It's 8 now, yeah. It used to be 4.
Yeah.
The bigger boxes for the South Tigris have 2 characters on each side. So we went into Inventors going, well, I need 8 characters because I can't just put scholars and wayfarers type characters on this box for Inventors. We need these inventor characters. So I knew I had to commission 8 anyway. And so I think before we even got to print for Inventors, we already had ideas for the expansion. So I just commissioned like 12 characters for Inventors, knowing that we're probably going to do these asymmetric player powers at some point and we can make use of them then. But
Yeah, I definitely think that same feedback could easily be given to inventors. Like, I think people, for me, just makes the game feel more alive.
We hope you've enjoyed our discussion about Men-Nefer, but we'd love to hear from you. Jump on the Garphill Games Discord and let us know on the podcast channel if you've played Men-Nefer and what you thought. Do you like games with a fixed number of turns? Is character art essential in a game? Welcome back to our top 200 BGG draft. We are very close to completing it. Today we're going to be looking at games 181 to 190. As I always say, we screenshotted these games when we started this draft, so I'm sure this list has changed a lot. But the games this time are Stone Age, Dominion 2nd Edition, War Chest, Praga Kaput Renyi, Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, Kemet, Istanbul, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, The Thames Murders and Other Cases, Unmatched Cobble and Fog, and Endeavour Age of Sail. So today we are going to have Shem banning, and then Sam will have first pick.
well, there is one game I like a lot less than all other games on this list, and I think it's quite fitting that we just talked about Men-Nefer. So sorry, Zach, but I'm banning Kemet.
No. Yeah, that was definitely going to be my pick if Sam didn't pick.
What do you got against the giant scorpions?
Everything.
Okay, well, I've got a pick now, and perhaps the game that I've enjoyed the most on this list is Praga, but I did eventually sell that game, and I'm sort of kind of done with it. It's a really cool game, but I don't need to play that again. I think the game that I could possibly play a lot, and it didn't even wow me, but I know that it's just completely foundational, and I know there's a lot of replay value for this game, is Dominion. And I'm going to pick Dominion, the OG deck builder, or perhaps one of the OG deck builders, with hundreds of expansions, maybe not hundreds, but lots of expansions. And I know that the more you play it, the better it gets from what I've heard. So I think this is a great game to add to my top 200, my 20 games. You guys played it?
Yeah.
The OG?
Yeah, I never really loved Dominion,
Neither.
but it's fun.
It's very pure.
Yeah. You made things hard for me because Kemet and Dominion were the only 2 games I've actually played on this list.
We got him.
Checkmate.
It's always our goal, right? Take out the games that Zach doesn't know.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm going to do, I've already got Endeavour Deep Sea. I reckon I'm just going to double Endeavour it, man, because
Wow.
There we go.
I've played, one version of Endeavour. I liked it. I probably will like the other version of Endeavour. And, Shem told me that he really likes Endeavour Age of Sail. It's probably his favourite Endeavour, I think. So, on that recommendation, I think I'm going to take Endeavour Age of Sail, just double Endeavour it on my list.
That's fair.
I thought you were full OGs, Shem. I thought you liked the OG Endeavour the most.
I do. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I mean, I like Age of Sail. I don't care so much for all the expansion-y stuff. But I mean, the core game's still there. It's still the same original game. It does look prettier. I would have probably taken that. So, good counterplay there.
To the ban.
You're going back to your little smelly bag, aren't you?
I'm going Smelly Dice Cup.
Smelly
Yeah,
Cup.
let's go.
I'm taking Stone
Cup.
Age because it's tried and true, and it was one of my first loves, and especially the smell of the cup, mostly the smell of the cup. But it has inspired me so much in my own game design, and if you listen to those episodes about the games that made us, this actually features a fair bit. So I will definitely take Stone Age
Great game.
because it's deserving of a top spot.
Thanks for listening to the Lens and Veil podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garphill Games. You can follow Garphill Games on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube by subscribing to our newsletter at garphill.com or by joining the Garphill Discord server.
Oh, the world feels kind of not lived in. It feels kind of dead. Like we're playing with these mummies and sphinxes and buildings. Sphinxes.
Don't play with the sphincter, Sam.
We're playing. Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Interestingly, Chrissy messaged me. She's like,
did you say sphincters? And I said to her, I was thinking before the podcast, I was like,
Don't say sphincters.
someone's bound to say it. It's just a coin flip as to who does it, because this whole time when we've been playing this game, we have not said the word sphinx at all. And it was just me that had to wear that.
Yeah.
I think when I play this game, every time I place a sphinx, I say sphincter, like intentionally. So I've got control over it. That's the thing.
Oh, man.
Oh my goodness.